Good evening. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with Chuck Rogers. This is Redwood Wonk. We're going to talk about the tragic and dark events that have happened in Washington, D.C. today. Probably one of the worst things to happen in a long time to American democracy, as far as I'm concerned. We will talk about that, but I don't want something else to get lost in the history. We decided we were going to talk a little bit about what happened in Georgia last night because the people made history down there. This is something that we really need to honor and recognize and not let it get lost because of the crazy that happened in Washington, D.C. today. And, we'll blame the people involved, but we'll also blame the leadership. But, in the meantime, we had an election. It was very close, but the Georgia has now elected its first black senator and its first Jewish senator. Jewish Senator Ossoff is 33 years old. The youngest, I'm told, the youngest senator since Biden was first elected to the Senate. And this was done in a state that has been red for so long. The last time a Democrat won was a very conservative Democrat in 2004 who pretty much switched parties afterwards. Last time a presidential candidate had won it, a Democratic presidential candidate, was 1992 when Clinton won it. I mean, this was a red state that has been gradually changing. We've discussed the Atlanta metropolitan area. It factored in real heavy last night. It was a fascinating seesaw going back and forth. First, the Democrats were ahead. Then, as more of the same day vote from the rural areas got counted, the Republicans were ahead. And then the Democrats pulled ahead again as soon as they started counting DeKalb County, Fulton County, and Cobb County in particular. And it was so overwhelming there, like 85-1, I think, in Fulton County, 85-15 in Fulton County. It was close, but the people who were clearly, the two candidates who were clearly not favored to win this, and certainly Ossoff wasn't favored to defeat Perdue, they've won it. The Republicans, of course, aren't conceding, despite the fact that they're down by tens of thousands of votes now. And Ossoff is outside of that 0.5 automatic recount area. So, if Perdue wants a recount, he's going to have to pay for it. That should have been the news today, as well as the certification. But it wasn't. So I'm going to let you say a few things, too, about Georgia. I'm sure you want to chime in about how important this is. Of course, it gives the Democrats back the Senate, too.
It does. It gives the Democrats back the Senate when you include Kamala Harris as vice president to break any ties at 50-50. Very significant for all the reasons you just outlined. I want to point out that this did not happen overnight. It is true that the demographics of the Southeast have been changing in general, especially in the Atlanta area, also in Savannah and Macon. But this is also the result of at least 10 years, if not more, of work on the part of people like Stacey Abrams and others in the state of Georgia and others in the Democratic Party in general who have helped in Georgia to get people registered, to get them interested in what's going on, and to show to them why it's important. And I think Stacey Abrams and others in Georgia should be applauded for the work that they've done. And not only that, I think the work that they've done should be a template for other states in the Southeast. There are people who think that the next two after Georgia will be Texas and North Carolina. And maybe those two states, even though they are already on the road toward what happened in Georgia, maybe they can use Georgia as a model for how they went about statewide activity to get people registered, to get them to vote, to educate them on why it's important. So I don't want to lose sight of that. It has not been easy, but it does show that persistence does pay off, even in the Southeast. So, cheers to the people in Georgia who did all this work to get to where we are today.
Yeah. And I want to say a little bit about it too, because part of what the difference was there were like over 100,000 people who turned 18 who
Right.
came to vote, and I think they were all excited about what happened in November because part of what has happened is the black vote in particular has been a lot of voters have become so discouraged that
Hmm.
they don't even want to bother to vote because every
Right.
time it's gotten close, they've lost, and there've been a lot of questions about those losses, the purging of the voters, and everybody wants to. Right now, a lot of Democrats are looking at the Secretary of State as a hero, but he's purging. He's still a Republican. He's still purging those lists, and that there needs to be a discussion about that as well. So purging black voters disproportionately from white voters, the and the rest. I mean, and I think that when November happened, I think even more of them started to get, wow, we could really make a difference here, and the whole country was fixated on them. You can make history here. You can return you can take Mitch McConnell out of his power at minimum. It's not a guarantee that a real progressive agenda is going to be passed because it's going to give a lot of power to people like Manchin and other moderates and people, maybe 6 people in the House, if they don't want something. So it might temper that a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. There's also the possibility that, given what's going on, some of the more moderate Republicans might cross over every once in a while, and you don't need the tiebreaker. So they're clearly breaking from the leadership on this. Yeah, definitely history was made. They actually outperformed Biden yesterday. Most of the same counties, pretty much
Right.
the only one county flipped blue. Washington County flipped from Purdue to Ossoff. I think Warnock had actually won that county, but I just watched that map, and it was a fascinating thing to watch. And woke up this morning, and Ossoff had increased his lead, and we knew it because the vast majority of votes were still in that Atlanta metropolitan area. I don't know how many times you and I have used that term, Atlanta metropolitan
Right.
area,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's made a huge difference. In politics. I mean, Cobb County used to be Newt Gingrich's hometown,
Yep.
right? That
Yep.
was
Absolutely.
his
Yep.
district. This is really good news because it's not just good news for the immediate that, okay, two Democratic senators are in. Biden will be able to get his judges through more easily. He can have the cabinet he wants.
Right.
And things will get to the floor for debate now. I mean,
Exactly.
one of the notorious things about Mitch McConnell is if he doesn't like it and there's any chance that anybody from the Republican Party was going to vote for it, he just didn't allow it on the floor. It's
Right.
happened before, but he did it routinely. I mean, it's like with the $2,000 checks. He wouldn't even allow it, even though Republican members themselves were supporting it, and because he just absolutely didn't like it. And anyway,
Don't forget what
that's about
he did
all
to
I
Barack
have to.
Obama too.
What's that?
Don't forget what he did to Barack Obama. I mean, he
Right.
said blatantly, "We're gonna make sure that he gets nothing done." That's how disgusting Mitch McConnell is. And so finally, he's no longer controlling the levers of power in the U.S. Senate. And so, yeah, it's going to make a big difference. We could actually do things like infrastructure. We could actually talk about healthcare and education and climate and so on and so forth. It's a long list of things that have not gotten done because of Mitch McConnell and the way he has decided to use the United States Senate for his own power grabs. So, yeah, this actually will get us to getting something done. And maybe maybe we can talk about this later, but there are all kinds of things being talked about today about the Supreme Court and whether Roberts will resign and maybe somebody else to get some younger Democrats
Right.
appointed. So we'll see. But yeah, a huge day for sure.
Yeah, there are actually a couple of Carter appointees who have been hanging on, so they'll probably retire. So he'll
Yeah.
probably get to do some judges real quickly because a lot of people just have been hanging on through Trump. And I think we're finally really everybody's like saying, well, let's why don't we move to Washington D.C. Anything else about Georgia you want to say?
Well, I think it's a ray of sunshine in an otherwise very dark time right now, and I'm glad it turned out this way. I was a little concerned that maybe Warnock was going to be the only one to win, and maybe not Ossoff. And while Warnock did outperform Ossoff, they both won. So that's the good news. You're right. I think immediately what we'll notice is that President Biden and Vice President Harris can get the cabinet they want, people they can work with, people who actually are competent in the areas where they are being decided on for leadership. And so we will see actually government working again, which has not happened since Mitch McConnell has been the majority leader. And so things will actually get done. And it's going to make a big difference. And I hope that the other southern states that could do this, if there were people in those other southern states who had the will, like Stacey Abrams did in Georgia, I hope some of the other Democratic leaders in the southern states look at this, see that it's possible, and get to work.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go to, why don't we talk a little bit about what was supposed to happen today? we were supposed to certify the electors. They were supposed to count it. The way the 12th Amendment works is the ballots are brought in. The vice president is supposed to count the ballots in front of everybody and announce the results. Of course, Trump and others were pushing for him to take an active role in this insurgency that they were talking about, the objections that were going to be raised by various senators. And they started right off today before they were interrupted, objecting to Arizona's voters. And I think the plan was that they were going to do that. You have to debate for 2 hours and then go to Pennsylvania or whatever would be next and debate that for 2 hours. I think they were hoping to drag it out to make whatever points it was that they wanted to make. I think some Republicans were afraid of that. In fact, even Mitch McConnell was saying this is not going to do the party any good. It's going to make us look crazy. Right. And I think as of tonight, they're going to shorten it. I think nobody wants to be part of this any more than they have already committed to. So we knew that was going to happen. It started right off, and they were starting to debate it when they were interrupted. And of course, this morning, Trump invited people with his tweets to come and have a wild time. I think he described wild as to what he was going to plan to do, and he went and gave a really fiery speech about, repeating all of the litany of conspiracy theories about the votes in all the different states. I mean, he just went through the list and got the crowd riled. And then, they went from wherever that was to the Capitol building. There were 2 barricades. They broke through both of them, and then got into the building. And you want to talk about what happened? What's happened?
Well, at least one was killed by gunfire. They actually got onto the floor of the United States Senate and the United States House. They took over the chambers. They got past what turned out to be too few law enforcement folks who were there. But yeah, you're right. Trump chose to speak at the rally before this happened and encouraged that group to march to the Capitol building. He encouraged them to do that. He said, I'm going to walk with you. Of course, he didn't. He went back to the safety of the White House and basically said nothing while all this was going on. The president-elect made a statement. Former President Bush issued a statement, but we got nothing but tweets from Donald Trump that really didn't say very much at all. So I hope that he's held accountable. In fact, one of the most conservative groups in Washington today, the National Association of Manufacturers, which is a highly conservative, business-oriented lobbying group in Washington, issued a statement today calling on Congress, or calling on Vice President Pence and the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment and get rid of Trump now before it's too late. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. But there are even conservative groups who thought that this was too far. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
More people could die if they decided not to. I mean, it's way too late for these people to be speaking up now. This should have been said 5 years ago when Trump announced. The guy was a known commodity then.
Mhm.
But of course, that didn't happen. But at least they're standing up now, some of them. So we'll see. But I hope that there are prosecutions that result from this. There should be. There should be hundreds of them, probably. I think that the bottom line is that this is proof. This is the proof that it was a grave error for the Republican Party to ignore the autopsy that they produced following the 2012 loss in the presidential election that year. There was a huge, if people don't remember, they took a long look at that race to figure out why they lost. And it produced a lot of things that you would expect. They needed to broaden their support. They needed to maybe separate themselves from certain factions within the Republican Party in order to move ahead into the 21st century. They ignored all of it. They ignored all of it and went in this direction. And this is the result. And I think that there are going to be some consequences for the Republican Party that we can talk about later. Some of the predictions, I think, some of the things that are going to happen within the Republican Party as a result of this, because right now, this is going to be the legacy of the Republican Party in this Trump term. This is going to be what people remember. This is going to be the last image. So the Republican Party will not be able to survive in its current incarnation with this kind of stain on people's minds.
I mean, I agree. And actually, a local Republican figure who runs for office, who sometimes comes to my blog, came onto my blog today and said that, well, you know, the Republicans should have been challenging the president for his behavior over the past 2 weeks. Quite frankly, I don't see any break from his pattern of behavior for the past 5 years. You know,
they should have stood up in June of 2015 when that guy came down his gold-plated escalator. That's when they should have stood up, because he was a known commodity. His whole family was known for decades. Anybody who follows all this, or especially people who have had business in New York or who knew people there, who followed things that were going on there, knew that banks had become disgusted with him long ago. The guy was a known commodity. The Republicans should have stood up then, but they were afraid of their own base. And that's why they didn't, because they were weak and afraid of their own base. Instead of leading that base into a better era, they capitulated and they allowed the base to lead them. That's the problem. The base has been leading the politicians instead of the other way around, because Republican politicians in this era are too weak.
Well, and let's take into account of the average person. If I believe that an election was stolen, and I do believe it was stolen in 2000, but if I believe that, I'm really angry. That's a failure of democracy. And what stake do I have in a system that's going to discount my vote? So for Trump to be pushing these theories, most of which originated on social media and are based on, some of them kind of crazy people testifying, and other people who, may have been telling the truth but didn't understand what they were looking at. They weren't suitcases, for instance, of ballots and the rest. There's no military ballots that were thrown into a river. It's all made up stuff. But if you come to believe that, then you're going to be this angry. You're going to want to storm the Bastille, so to speak, And so for Trump to be pushing that and pushing it this morning as late as that, but also for the 12 or 13 Republicans who signed up to justify opposing it on the basis too, they're saying that it was stolen, right? I mean, they might not believe it, but they are playing into that. So you've got all of these leaders, these national leaders, saying that the election was stolen. That makes you culpable. You are an accessory.
Exactly the right word. They are culpable because they know better. And the reason they're doing it is for their own cynical, egotistical drives. All of these people who, like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and so on, did this knowing that they were just trying to make points with the base because they have their eyes on 2024. That's the reason they did this.
Yeah.
They knew better. They knew better. They are the ones, along with Trump and along with the right-wing media, who have been stoking this fire for all these years. And then Trump comes along and he throws gasoline on it. And this is where we end up. They are all culpable. I agree with you. That's the right word. And they should be held to account. And I hope that they are.
The Loeffler and Perdue, I mean, they've been on this narrative since the day after the election when they called for the resignation because they know they needed that crazy base. But I think they carried it too far by supporting this.
And all of the things that led up to this were easily checkable for anybody who wanted to double check to see if they were being told the correct information or not. But guess what? People who only get their news from Facebook would not know anything different than what people like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley and Lindsey Graham, and I mean, it's a long list, and people who only get their information from Twitter only know what Donald Trump is telling them. So, you know, there's fault, there's blame enough to go around, including people who will just blindly follow somebody like Trump or Fox News or OAN or Newsmax or whoever it is. You know, it shows you that as citizens, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to make sure that we're informed and to make sure that we check where we're getting information from. All of this is easily checkable. Everything that he's saying. How many court cases went against them? 60 some?
I think we're at 66 now.
66? Trump appointed judges?
Yeah, some of them.
Trump appointed, yes. And so all of this is checkable. It's just that for whatever reason, Trump's base refuses to accept any information that he doesn't sign off on. And that's a problem for sure. I don't know how we fix this either, because we have, as we've talked about before, we have siloed information right now. There's no crosstalk. There's no discussion. There's no debate. So that's a huge problem. I don't have the answer for that. I don't have the fix for that, and I don't know what it might be, but we need to figure it out. Yeah,
you mentioned Facebook. It's actually Parler where a lot of conservatives have moved over to. Yeah. That's their form of choice. So we're not even going to have the same social media. And, you know, I was on today debating people about what was going on in Washington, and there were right-wingers who were saying, "Oh, this is a peaceful demonstration." I cracked up because they've been pushing this thing, and you're going to learn how peaceful demonstrations are going to work. You know, this isn't going to be like BLM and Antifa looting places and burning buildings, and look what happened, much worse. I mean, you know, that's. Yeah, I do want to.
I mean, they broke windows in the Capitol building to get in, to gain entrance. They overwhelmed the Capitol Police. You know, and there's another question. Why was the National Guard not there already? Because there were signals that all of these folks were going to be showing up, and we already knew that this was a smoldering fire. So, you know, there's going to be, I'm sure, some Monday morning quarterbacking on this after it's all over. So we'll see where all the blame ends up. But certainly there are a lot of people who are culpable, and I hope that people are held to account.
I want to continue that discussion, but before I forget, I want to point out a little, you want to point out little points of light and heroism. As the Senate floor was being evacuated, everybody was leaving and going to places where they literally had to hide. They were going into areas, and some of the Democrats actually didn't even want to go into certain rooms because the Republicans were still refusing to wear masks, and it was really closed area, and they're in their 70s, you know. So, so anyways, as that was happening, nobody thought about the Electoral College ballots. They were sitting in 3 boxes on the table. Apparently, it was a young woman, who noticed it and went and grabbed them and brought them to whoever needed to have them, saying, you might want these, because they probably would have gotten burned or destroyed if they were left there. I would like to know this Paige's name, because she deserves a statue if it is a woman.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that was, that was saving the day. I mean, it would have probably been ceremonial. They would have created new ones, but still, just it symbolically, that was there. Of course, as we're recording this on Wednesday, January 6th in the evening, the Congress has reconvened and they are going through the motions of counting the ballots. I believe that the opposition has decided they're going to limit their objection to just Arizona, go through the debate and then let it go and then try to get it done, based on what I heard on the radio on the way home. But
I hope that's true.
I hope that's true too. Mitch McConnell was up there, trying to say, "Oh, we can't let democracy fail." But if I was to point to any single person responsible for this, I'm not even going to say Trump. He's mentally ill. I don't even know if he can control himself anymore, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But the 25th Amendment that is being brought up. I mean, he is dangerous. There needs to be a serious discussion of that right now. I don't even know what the thing is, but Mitch McConnell has been in power for 10 years, and it's gone this way. He came to power with the Tea Party, which started, it didn't start, there's always been this element of politics going all the way back to McCarthyism and the like. But he really honed it to his advantage, got the majority based on the Tea Party objections to what they were, portraying as falsely as socialized medicine, which was basically a market approach created by the Heritage Foundation and adopted by one of their own, Mitt Romney, in Massachusetts. It's a market-based, it's not social medicine, but misinformation with a lot of crazy behind it, populism, and then he took over the reins and just absolutely tried to block Obama every step of the way, the whole time. And then once Trump was in, reversed himself. All of a sudden now they're going to worry about deficits again. We've discussed this, right? If I was to put it in, it's a lot of people that you can blame for this. But if I was going to put the fault on any single person, it's not even Trump. It's Mitch McConnell, because he's smart enough to know better, but he doesn't care. For him, it's just cold power. That's his interest.
You're right. He does not care. And that's disgusting. And I think you're right. I think, the silver lining, if there is one, is that the legacy of Mitch McConnell will be attached to this forever. This will be in the history book next to Mitch McConnell's name. Thank goodness. So that some other majority leader of any party doesn't come to power and think that Mitch McConnell is a good mentor or a good model for how to run the United States Senate. Just the opposite. He's run the United States Senate in the most anti-American, anti-democratic way, maybe in the history of this country. So, the silver lining for me is that Mitch McConnell will be attached to this forever.
Yeah.
And I hope that people in all political parties who think that they want to someday rise to the level of majority leader in the United States Senate will recognize that Mitch McConnell is no model for how to run the Senate.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to save my further comments about him because I'm going to have two predictions at the end of the show, okay, and one is about him. Well, anyway, I mean, it's just, this is one of the worst things that's happened in terms of political things since then. I mean, we had a lot of horrible demonstrations. I would say Kent State was worse. More people died, but I don't blame that on the demonstrators necessarily. Maybe a little bit, but not much on that. But if I was to go to the example of a demonstration that went crazy, you have to go back to the Chicago 1968, and even that, okay, they got into a few places, the convention and all of that, and raised a ruckus. They didn't actually attack conventioners, it was, and anyway, I mean, that's about the worst. The takeover of Columbia State, okay, there are a few things like that, but nothing on this scale. And nothing. And I really, you question as to why the National Guard wasn't there. And by the way, they bypassed the president.
They did
to get that in there. They went straight to Pence to order them in. But there needs to be possibly a purge of the police. Now they were treating. I won't say they were treating with kid gloves. I did see some instances where there were batons and a lot of back and forth there, but there's at least one picture of an officer in the building doing a selfie with one of the rioters. That officer should be summarily fired just without return mail. There's no call for that. Their job is to clear it out and not to give it credence at all. But so I was more questioning, that we were a lot of us on the left have been saying, well, what if these people had been black or they'd been hippies, right? Yep. It would be a lot different. But then I talked to my wife about it, Jana, and she said, yeah, but you know what? There is another difference besides, I was blaming it on police culture, but she also says that, the black protesters and the hippie protesters are probably not packing. But right. We know a lot of these people were packing. I mean, they're bringing guns. They're open carry and the rest, and just feeling entitled to do that. The pages who were hiding claim that there were several shots that went off, not just one. So, there's a theory that this was an accidental thing, but there were other gunshots. One woman was killed. We don't know anything about the circumstances. We don't know if it was a protester. We don't know if it was somebody who belonged in there, and I scoured the social media looking for hints on it, and can't find anything. A person died because of this.
Yep.
So anybody who's going to be charged, and I understand there were about 10 arrests, maybe 13 by the time the last I had a chance to look. Anybody charged with stoking this and doing this, they really need to look at felony murder charges, because that
I agree.
got this woman killed. Felony murder is, of course, when somebody is killed in the commission of a felony, and when it's tailored towards, had this not happened, the killing wouldn't have happened, right? It's because they went in there with guns, right? It's not, it's not like, they were in a getaway car and they crashed the car and somebody died. They went in there with guns, into the Capitol building with guns.
Yep.
That, it's just, regardless of what the law is, that was just completely out of order. I'm kind of wondering, I know there's a Republican congresswoman who's saying that she's going to pack and is having discussion with the DC police chief. I don't think she's going to be allowed to do it at this point.
Let's hope not.
I expect that Congress might even pass a law that says you can't carry a gun within a certain radius. That'll probably be challenged, and this Supreme Court will probably overturn it, but it's going to be a discussion. Anyway, I don't know if you want to say anything else about how it was handled by the police.
You mentioned Kent State, and let's recall that the students on the campus at Kent State were unarmed.
Right.
And Nixon ordered the National Guard to Kent State. For anybody who ever travels in that part of the country, I recommend that you go to the Kent State campus. It's all marked off where everything happened. I've been there a number of times. It's one of the most moving places I think that there is in that part of the country. And those kids were unarmed, and they were just shot down, 4 of them.
Right. Yeah, a couple of them weren't even in protesters.
Exactly.
And Jackson State, I'm not sure any of them were protesters. That happened shortly thereafter. 3 were killed. The bullets went into the dorms. It was almost like a Breonna Taylor kind of a thing. Right. And we've got a history of this. This is what happens when as we said, black people and hippies protest. I mean,
and it's also what happens when you get unstable people like Richard Nixon or Donald Trump in the Oval Office. So, we need a much more informed public who is actually tethered to facts and reality, because this is serious business, obviously. And for some reason here, now in the year, 2021, we still haven't figured it out.
And I think there needs to be an investigation onto the police, what happened here, how they were allowed to get into the Capitol. And because if it wasn't police culture, I mean, there are a lot of people who, it reminds me of a lot of other incidents like the Judy Berry bombing and this one. I think that the reason they never found it and didn't follow up the leads is because people in the police culture just don't want to go after people that they culturally identify with. Conservatives, kind of the redneck type people, they want it to be about the people that they have deemed to be scumbags. And in this case, if you've got even one officer shooting a selfie with somebody who's already broken the law and is in the building, quite frankly, I see that officer as an accessory. And so if they were treating this group with kid gloves because they were worried that some of the demonstrators would pull guns, well, then we need to examine that. If they were doing it because they just didn't want to come down on them the same way they come down on Antifa or BLM, that needs to be looked at. I think I want a full explanation as to how this happened, and because there were two barricades that they broke through.
Exactly, and there's good video. I've seen several. Some of it is likely cell phone video. Some of it is from local television cameras that were there. Some of it is from network cameras, but there are multiple angles about what was going on, and it's apparent that the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan DC Police were just overwhelmed by the numbers, and the crowd just came at them like a tsunami, like a wave, and just pushed everything back. The law enforcement was so outnumbered, they did not have a chance. In fact, there's one video as the crowd gets up the steps, where first of all, they're not supposed to be, they just start jumping through the windows, and there's nothing that law enforcement can do because they're so outnumbered. And then they get into the rotunda of the Capitol, and they're just walking around, and they end up on the floor of each chamber, in the seat of the Speaker and in the seat of the President of the Senate. So I think law enforcement was just not expecting, for whatever reason, the kinds of numbers that were at that rally and that they saw coming down the street toward the Capitol building. They were just outnumbered and overwhelmed.
This wasn't the biggest rally, though. There have been bigger rallies than that, and they knew it was going to happen.
Not rallies where people were trying to break in and disrupt the system. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Is that once the crowd got to the Capitol, they overwhelmed the Capitol Police there.
I get it, but people were saying they were going to do this.
That's what I'm saying. They should have been prepared, and they were not. There were signals going way back, even during the campaign. That how many times did Trump say, if I lose, it can only be because it was stolen? I mean, there were signals being sent that this could happen long ago, and they still were unprepared.
Stand down and stand by. I mean, these are all messages that, that were sent. And I'm sorry, but the Republican leadership encouraged it by not shutting this thing down, saying, no, you are BS crazy. For even putting forth the theory that this was stolen, after look into it, do some recounts and the rest like that. But, it's don't believe that Biden somehow magically and aligned with the Chinese and the Venezuelans, managed to generate 7 million, 8 million votes. I mean, it just, didn't happen. Their own DHS did it, and all of the Republicans knew it. All of the Republicans knew that.
And that's why this information feedback loop that we're stuck in is so dangerous, because it means that the politicians and the right-wing media just feed the base what they want to hear, because they know they'll keep coming back. And instead of telling them the truth and what is right and wrong, they just tell them what they want to hear. And it ends up ginning up this kind of instability and this destabilized society that we're in right now. We've got to get out of this somehow. So,
well, get ready for the next conspiracy theory, because this is on the internet with photos and everything. The theory is that it was Antifa dressed up as Proud Boys who did the storming, and it is going to be out there. I expect if Trump gets his account back, he's going to tweet that theory. And I'm not even going to go into the details about their quote unquote proof. They claim to have a photograph of 4 people who are actually Antifa, and who knows? Maybe there are Antifa people who disguised themselves and went in, but that's going to be that this was Antifa that manufactured this.
Well, whoever did it.
And
it was wrong no matter who did it.
It was already suggested on OAN and Newsmax, the 2 media that you've done. There's one woman in a video looking at it saying, well, people are saying that those are Antifa, and I have to, wonder because, Proud Boys are always so peaceful. It's like, yeah. So it's just, that's their reporter, their objective reporter. So that's going to be a push. You're going to be seeing that over the next few days. But anyway, in the meantime,
what responsibility do Republican politicians have in that case?
Yeah, right. It's time for them to step up and stand up to this and start attacking. I will say Mitt Romney has been pretty good over the past week or so. What?
There's one.
Yeah, there's one. But we didn't even get into the discussion of this because it's ancient history now of the phone call over the weekend. We're running out of time. The phone call to the Secretary of State that may have won it for the Democrats. I mean, when you have races this close, you got to look at everything. And I wonder if there weren't Republicans and moderates in Georgia saying, okay, this is going way off the deep end. I don't want to encourage this anymore. I don't see Loeffler and Perdue standing up to this. I'm either going to vote for the Democrat or just not vote at all.
Well, I think there was a lot of that. And I think there are certain counties where I think that's going to be looked at. I know that there are some analysts who are trying to figure out exactly what you're talking about there. It seems that there were some counties where the Republican turnout did not match the general election turnout. And on the Republican side, I'm talking about, especially as far as same-day voting goes, which is when the Republicans usually make up the difference that they fear that they have lost in the early voting to Democrats. So I think that as the statistics become more available and there's time to analyze them, I think that you're going to be right. I think that there are going to be some signs there that a lot of moderate Republicans just sat this one out. And we'll see, but and we may never know for sure, but I think that's certainly possible. I also think, I hope that someone in the state of Georgia does file charges based on that phone call, because it was election tampering, it was abuse of power, it was a lot of things. And the Secretary of State made a comment that the reason he had his lawyer there and the reason they decided to record the call was because they had a feeling that the call was going to be exactly what it turned out to be, because they had experience with Lindsey Graham prior to this, doing the same thing, but they didn't have the recording.
Right.
So, the Republican Trump-supporting Secretary of State in Georgia was the one who saw this coming and had his attorney there and recorded it, because he thought that this might be what the call was going to be about, and he was right. And it was like listening to someone in power in Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere else. That's exactly what it sounded like, or maybe a mob boss.
Well, quick note: that lawyer who was the woman who was on the phone with him got kicked out of her firm.
Right.
And so, there are standards out there.
Yeah,
and I'm assuming they're probably a fairly conservative firm. But that call was way out of line. I actually spent the hour plus listening to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Up until now, I think on the show I've talked a little bit about the Comey Rule, a movie about Comey's interactions with the president, and I wondered if they were being exaggerated. They're not. This could have been right from that script. I mean, It was just he's threatening them with criminal prosecution, and not saying I need you to find 11,000, however many votes, for me. I mean, of course, he claims they're claiming that was just imprecise wording, that he didn't mean to fabricate it, but to agree to just get rid of some of the ballots that are questionable, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so you got a combined threat with with a trying to get somebody to commit election fraud for you. That is a crime. There's a specific statute to that. And not only should they be looking into that, but there was also a very mysterious early resignation of the attorney general person, the district attorney there for that district in Atlanta, who probably would have waited until the 20th to leave like everybody else. He mysteriously left. There's somebody that's going in right now, and the question is whether or not this guy is going in there to charge the Secretary of State. Man, that would, I don't know how much more he can do to destroy the Republican Party. And their big complaint and Kemp's complaint, the guy who was the one Purdue's complaint, not Kemp has been quiet. Purdue's complaint was, that shouldn't have been recorded. That's disgusting. It's like,
Actually, the state of Georgia is one of the states that does allow one-ended recording without the permission of the other. Georgia is one of those states. Not all states are like that, but Georgia is one of them. So, that has already been addressed. The person who resigned was the U.S. attorney there in Atlanta, and presumably there will be a new U.S. attorney there after Biden is sworn in, somebody of Biden's choosing. So maybe that U.S. attorney will want to take this up. I don't know. But I think that's clearly the reason why the U.S. attorney in Atlanta resigned, because he didn't want any part of this.
Unless there was also pressure on him to try to prosecute the Secretary of State.
Something.
Yeah, we'll know in a few days if the guy who's in there temporarily is going to do that. We'll see. But Trump, it's about loyalty.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, I just, I didn't want to get into, talking about Donald Jr.'s crazy speech at the rally, and the fact that he went to the rally and barely mentioned Purdue and Loeffler and went just on his litany, the same thing he did this morning, all about himself and all the great stuff he's did. No mention of COVID whatsoever anywhere in that speech. None. Zero. And it's just, I mean, and we're at a pitch right now, ambulances, running out of ambulances in Southern California. I mean, it's scary. And apparently today, I just want to get back to the demonstrations real quick before we get done. Apparently there was problems in Olympia, Washington. Where they tried to get into the Capitol building there. I don't know what all happened. I just heard a little bit about it. I will say that the Trumper protest locally at the courthouse was peaceful. I think the average age was about 80. So,
And that's great. I mean, that's what this country is all about. You do have the right to protest. You have the right to assemble. You have the right to whatever opinion you want. But you do not have the right to storm the Capitol and shoot people, and disrupt the business of the United States Senate and the United States House. That's a line there, and it's clear, and anybody should know it.
Yeah. So, the question is what's going to happen for these last few weeks. Hopefully there'll be a serious discussion of the 25th Amendment, and maybe we'll talk about that next week. But we are at the time of the show where we give our predictions, and we are at the beginning of the year. This is our second show of 2021. No, it's our first show. Oh, and we didn't even talk about the crazy New Year's Eve party in Mar-a-Lago, but that's all right. So why don't you give us your first predictions of the year 2021?
Two quick ones, and they have to do with our two major parties. One, let's start with the Democrats, since we've been mostly talking about the Republicans. The Democrats, once everybody is sworn in, once we get all past this and Biden and Harris are sworn in, the Democratic Party is gonna go through some growing pains here. The Democratic Party, now that they have control of the Senate, is going to get pressure from the progressives to go bold because they now have power. the Democratic Party is going to get pressure from moderates who have an eye on 2022, who want to be a little more careful so that maybe they don't get hit as hard in the midterm elections in 2022. So we need to watch and see how that plays out. I have a feeling that after what we've just been through, the progressives might win this. The Democrats might just say, heck with it, let's go bold. But I don't know, but that's going to be a fight in the Democratic Party. On the Republican side, clearly, after what happened in the Capitol and after the last 4 years, the Republicans have a decision to make, and it is clearly decision time. They need to decide whether they're going to be the party of Trump and Trumpism or not. So my prediction is this. My prediction is that Republicans, like you mentioned Romney earlier, like Mitt Romney and Ben Sass and some of the others that are reasonable people, even though we disagree with them policy-wise, they are still reasonable, and they know the difference between right and wrong. Those Republicans are going to form their own caucus within the Republican conference, separate from the Trump caucus. So, and that will be the beginning of the split of the two sides of the Republican Party that eventually somewhere down the road, who knows when, will end up in two different parties. But they're going to start, the reasonable Republicans are going to see that they have to distance themselves from Trumpism at this point for their own political survival. So I think that they're going to create their own caucus within the Republican conference. We'll see if that happens.
All right. Well, maybe slightly related to that, and this is my long-term prediction. I think Mitch McConnell is going to resign. Maybe not right away, but sometime before 2022. I think that there's going to be a lot of pushback against him, and he's getting older. He's not healthy. We saw his blue hands, and I think that the Republicans are going to want to free themselves from him and his image.
Good.
Second prediction, I think one of the reasons that Biden was waiting to see what happened in the Senate with the Senate race to finish up with his cabinet picks. He picked Merrick Garland today, by the way, who was Obama's, to be Attorney General, Obama's justice recommendation. But I think when it comes to the Secretary of Labor, he's brought in a few progressives, but not enough. I'm going to go bold here and say that he's picking Bernie.
Yeah.
If not somebody equally progressive, it's not going to be, a technocratic, negotiate labor deals over 3 martinis lunch union guy. It's going to be somebody progressive, but I think it's going to be Bernie. I think that's what he wants to give him so that, when he is pushed by the progressive left, he can say, well, look, I gave you Bernie, right?
Yeah.
He wants to be able to say that. And plus, I do think Biden genuinely wants different voices in there, not to have the same voices yapping at him all the time.
I think you're right, and just to I'm glad that was one of your predictions. Just to underscore that, let's recall that Biden and Bernie, even though they're not in the same exact part of the Democratic Party, they have worked together for decades, and they have a lot of respect for each other. So I hope he does. I hope he does go with Bernie, and that does fit with what I was saying. I think that the progressive side of the Democratic Party may win out on this one.
Well, if either Warnock or Ossoff had lost yesterday, I don't think we would have gotten it.
Totally different.
It would have been hard to get it through, but
totally
I think
different.
It's going to go through.
Yep.
All right. Well, this is the first show of 2021. I was getting ahead of myself there. Probably one of the most eventful days we've had. You can listen to us on the radio and on television on Channel 12 or 96.7 at KCZH. And, next week, there'll be plenty to talk about, we know. Until then, I want to thank Matt for engineering and producing this and for this opportunity. And until then, we'll see you next week.